Hello, everyone. Mr. Temple here. It's Sunday when we don't normally have school, but I realized today is 9/11. It is September 11th. And I remember that as my students, 13, 14 years old, you were not alive when the terrible events of 9/11 happened. And even though I'm sure you've heard of it, had it talked about in class or etc., I figured it's not as real to you as it was for your parents or maybe older siblings who actually lived through that time. And as a history teacher, I don't like to just assume that you know about things. So, very quickly, I just wanted to say what 9/11 is or what happened for those of you that maybe don't really know or don't remember. So, September 11th, 2001, a terrible terrorist attack happened in the United States. Some terrorists from another country hijacked four passenger planes full of people. And their plan was to overpower or kill the pilots because these terrorists all had flight training. And their plan was to crash these planes into certain important places in the United States to basically turn their planes like into flying bombs. And that's what they largely did. They crashed, the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers were two super huge office buildings in New York that were monuments. Like the whole world knew these super tall Twin Towers. They crashed the first plane into one of them. I remember being at school. Everybody who was alive and of age at the time can tell you exactly where they were when this happened because it's just burned in their memories. I was a teacher at a high school. We were about to take some of our students to an assembly. The news said that a plane had hit one of the buildings. Now, the internet was kind of new, and so news didn't travel so quickly. We thought maybe it was a small one-person plane that accidentally crashed. But then a short time later, a second plane crashed into the other tower. So now it was obvious that it wasn't an accident. This is someone was doing this on purpose. And there was a lot of fear. People didn't know, are we being attacked by a country? Is it a war? We didn't know. And then not much later after that, a plane crashed into the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the big office building, I guess. It's super big in Washington, D.C. It's where our military's top headquarters is. And then so now there's people don't know what's going on. A fourth plane was we believe now, planning to crash into another building in Washington, maybe the Capitol or the White House. But what we found out was, because there were cell phones then, passengers on that last plane were talking to their loved ones and let us know that some of the passengers were going to try to rush the terrorists and try to stop the terrorists from crashing the plane where they were trying to crash it. They knew they would all die, but their thought was at least we can stop them from hitting their target. And they did this. And the plane, instead of hitting a building, it crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. So the loss of life was terrible, not just everyone killed on the planes, but in the Twin Towers, where there were thousands of workers, and in the Pentagon, where there were thousands of workers, there were deaths. But the most people died in those Twin Towers, the videos of which I'm sure you've seen. Those two towers collapsed, and somewhere around 6,000 people were killed that day between the planes, those buildings, and the Pentagon. And the biggest thing about this was not just the terrible loss of life, but it was the first time that a foreign terrorist had successfully done anything like this in America. But then for about the next 20 years, our military was involved in wars overseas, primarily in Afghanistan, which was the country that housed these terrorists and allowed them to do what they were doing around the world. The whole world changed. If you've been in an airplane in your life, all the security where you have to be there out well in advance and all of the searches, that really got beefed up because of 9/11. And our whole sense of security changed. So it was a terrible day in our history that we'll never forget. And it has affected your life, even though you were not alive when it happened. So again, it's a somber day. It's a day to be thankful for the safety and freedoms that we have, and it's a day to honor or a time. It doesn't have to just be one day. Like you might see this on Monday after the day is passed. Doesn't matter. To remember the sacrifices of our military, because one thing that people often remember about that time, when those Twin Towers were hit, firemen and policemen went running into this burning tower to try to save who they could, and many of those firemen and policemen were killed when the towers collapsed on them. So it's also a time to be grateful for first responders with military, police, fire, etc., who have such a dangerous job. So I just want to make sure you knew a little bit about what 9/11 was about. Every adult knows, but you weren't even around at that time. So it was important that you know. Okay, guys, you all have a wonderful evening.